Hi, it's E. I was obviously not planning to make this video, but I felt that if my goal for this year was to share more of my creative self online, it would only be fitting to share this, a tribute to a huge influence on my creative philosophy. NPR called him a monster drummer with a poet's heart, Neil Peart. Sadly, he passed away a few days ago, which was announced a little later by his family. He had been suffering from brain cancer privately, which is unsurprising, for 3.5 years before passing away on January 7th. If you do not know, Neil Peart was the drummer and main lyricist for the Canadian rock power trio Rush. Neil Peart was perhaps the most prolific rock drummer of all time. Whenever you listen to a drum solo of his, you're not just hearing raw talent, you're hearing years of practice. It's incredible to hear how accurate and precise he is. What's interesting about Neil Peart is that he said that their earlier songs were sometimes hard for him to play because his technique had improved so much over the years. Now, I know nothing about music, but I do know that if there was a fantasy draft for rock bands, I would want him on my roster. It has been said that Neil Peart took Rush, by all means a great band already, and made it legendary. It is not just because of his drumming. He was truly the most provocative lyricist in the rock genre. And I don't mean that he was vulgar. He was thoughtful in a way that most musicians never dream of being. And this aspect of his musicianship is what has influenced my creative philosophy most of all. When I first heard YYZ as a 10-year-old, I immediately fell in love. And as I grew older, I began listening to more and more of Rush's discography. I had been introduced by my father, and Rush quickly became like my favorite band. And it was Neil's lyrics that probably intrigued me most. The Trees provided an interesting perspective on racial relations and inequality. Tom Sawyer was like a book report. Xanadu, don't even get me started on Xanadu. I actually wrote a reflection on that song in a literature class in college. 2112 is the consummate rock opera. I can't believe that album came out almost 45 years ago. I've heard that he wrote Red Barchetta after being inspired by an article in Car and Driver. I could go on and on about the fun and funky lyrics that color those songs and so many others. It was through Rush, and specifically those lyrics, that I realized the media I consumed could be better. Music could be better. It could be cool and smart at the same time, even if Rush is kind of for nerds. And as I came to expect more out of the music I consumed, that it should be thoughtful and purposeful, I also came to expect more of myself and of the work I produced. For this tribute piece, I decided to take inspiration from the song Armor and Sword off the album Snakes and Arrows. There are other songs that maybe shed more light on Neil's personality or on his beliefs. There is, of course, the song Limelight, in which Neil articulates his feelings on fame. There's the song Faithless, in which he directly addresses his opinions on religion. I think this song has a little more finesse, though. In theme, it's very similar to Faithless, but it uses metaphor to convey those thoughts. The opening line is, "The snakes and arrows a child is heir to are enough to leave 1,000 cuts." And later, Neil wrote, "What should have been our armor becomes a sharp and angry sword." I interpret this to mean that religion, which is often passed down to children by their parents, is intended to protect and guide the child, but it often does more harm than good. Religion, which is meant to provide personal peace, often gives way to violence and arguments. Now, I totally disagree with this sentiment as a devout Christian, but nevertheless, I have always respected Neil's lyrics, and the lyrics to this song are no exception to that. So with that interpretation of the lyrics in mind, I set about to create this drawing. The concept I went with is kind of that child from the first line of the song. He's facing towards something defensively, wearing very little armor, but wielding a sword. The snakes are on his side, and as you can see, he doesn't seem concerned with them, but they look ready to pounce. The arrow that he is equipped with cannot do him any good without a bow. If the theme of the song is that religion is not effective to help you deal with life, then in this case, the snakes, helmet, sword, and arrows are not going to help this kid. He clearly does not know how to use the sword. The helmet is too big for his head. The snakes are either going to trip him up or strike him directly. The lyrics to the song at one point say, "We hold beliefs as a consolation, a way to take us out of ourselves." And I think that's what this kid is feeling. His beliefs, which are symbolized by those things I mentioned, are nothing but consolation. They don't really solve whatever problem it is he's about to face. For the background of this piece, I obviously found inspiration from the cover of the Snakes and Arrows live album, and with a little inspiration from a t-shirt I got at a Rush concert, I designed the helmet and sword. So coming up with the idea for this piece wasn't too difficult. However, I did have a little bit of trouble with the illustration, as I found that the brush pens I was using bled a lot. I don't think I was using the best paper for this, and I was also probably using too much water. But in the end, I think it turned out, though the colors are a little more saturated than I wanted them to be. I had to go over certain areas a lot to make sure it was blended out. So the album Snakes and Arrows was a later entry to the Rush discography, but I love that album as much as any other. I think that though Rush's most famous songs are not on there, the album as a whole has great listenability, if that's even a word. The collection of songs is really strong, and the album holds sentimental value to me as well, in all honesty. I went to go see Rush live during the Snakes and Arrows tour with my dad in 2008, and that was probably one of the most incredible nights of my young life. I wore a concert t-shirt that I got from that concert every week, usually on Wednesdays, if I recall correctly, and that was probably going on for like a year. I don't want to go on and on anymore, so I sped up the recording a lot. I trimmed a lot of stuff out, and I did a lot of the background and stuff off screen. The reason for me wanting to trim it down so much is that I really can't speak that much on Neil Peart as a person. He was really incredibly private, and he didn't enjoy interacting with his fans that much. I think that he would probably assert that none of us, his fans I mean, really knew him that well at all. But I do know a little bit about him from some of his autobiographies and interviews and stuff. And what I can say about him is this, that he endured more sorrow in a short time span of his life than anyone should ever really have to. And to me, it's miraculous that he survived all of that heartache. Maybe it was to prove his point that you don't need faith in organized religion to guide you through life. And so he soldiered on. I highly recommend checking out his books if you're interested, because Neil Peart really did lead an interesting life. One short anecdote I'll share is that when he went to the audition to be the drummer for Rush, he brought his drum kit in garbage bags because he didn't have any cases for his drums. It's crazy to think that he went from that to being probably the most well-respected drummer of all time. So with that said, though I know he can't hear me. I just want to say thank you to Neil Peart. He touched my life and the lives of many through his music and through his influence. I wish all the best to those grieving his loss, to his family, to Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson. I really do believe that we will not see a drummer of his caliber again in a long, long time.